In less than 18 months, the illusion of the billionaire exile finally broke. What looked like a carefully curated Valentine's Day Instagram post, a rare, sunlit photograph of Prince Harry embracing his daughter Lilibet in a California garden was actually a devastating metaphor for commercial desperation. To the casual observer, it was a glimpse into an idyllic post-royal life. But to those watching the slow, grinding collapse of Brand Sussex, it was the ultimate moral contradiction. A man who tore apart his own family on global television under the strict pretext of protecting his children's. Privacy was now watching his wife use those very children as algorithmic life rafts to save a failing lifestyle brand. This is the story of how the Duke and Duchess of Sussex ran out of enemies, ran out of elite allies, and finally turned the tension inward. To understand the magnitude of this fracture, we have to look back at the golden era they walked away from. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle did not just leave the British royal family, they exited with a billion-dollar mandate from the public. They were the ultimate disruptors armed with unprecedented global sympathy, Netflix deals, Spotify contracts, and the implicit backing of Hollywood's highest echelon. They positioned themselves as humanitarians of the highest moral rectitude, a modern progressive alternative to an ancient stifling institution. Meghan was poised to conquer the lifestyle space a Duchess of the American Riviera, while Harry stood as the traumatized prince finally breaking the cycle of generational pain. They demanded privacy, and in return, the world gave them an audience of billions. But as 2026 unfolds, that gilded cage in Montecito looks increasingly like a solitary confinement of their own making. The contrast is staggering. They wanted to be perceived as global philanthropists, Lord and Lady Bountiful, handing out millions to save the world. But true philanthropy requires actual capital. As Daily Mail's Alison Boshoff meticulously detailed, the Sussexes are running a basket case economy. Their recent tours, including a heavily criticised trip to Colombia that allegedly cost a staggering $4 million in security, operate at a total loss. The deals have dried up, the Spotify contract is long gone. The Netflix partnership is hanging by a thread, reduced from prestige documentaries to a polo show and a rebranded lifestyle company. Or, as ever, which failed to sell a single product under its original name, American Riviera Orchard. This financial reality is the invisible pressure cooker behind closed doors. When the elite protectors from Ari Emanuel to the Hollywood heavyweights began washing their hands of the Sussexes, the strategy shifted from global domination to frantic survival. And survival, it seems, required breaking the one rule Prince Harry held above all others. The first major rupture in the marriage dynamic centers entirely on Archie and Lilibet. For years, Harry's defining narrative, his core trauma, has been the relentless media exposure he suffered as a child. He fundamentally believed his children must be shielded, kept entirely off the public stage. But Meghan, facing a brand that was flatlining, saw a different reality. The children, as investigative biographer Tom Bauer revealed, were suddenly viewed as essential for the brand. They are not shown fully, of course. It is a slow, agonizing drip feed of exposure. The back of a head, a tiny hand, a silhouette in a garden holding red balloons. It is the PR equivalent of the parlor game Grandmother's Footsteps, a slow, calculated creep into the public eye. Engineered to drive engagement without fully crossing the line of exploitation. This is where the story shifts from a business failure to an ethical collapse. Harry, a man who has repeatedly monetized his own childhood trauma to punish his family, is now trapped in a marriage where his children are being softly weaponized for Instagram likes. It is an unavoidable truth that his wife is telling him in actions, if not in words, the primary concern of your life. The privacy of our children must take a back seat because we have to make money. The Daily Mail, a publication historically terrified of Sussex litigation, publicly noting this tension signifies that the protective bubble around the couple has burst. The elite circles are not just annoyed, they have pulled the ladder up, and the tension is visible. The man who once commanded global stages alongside his wife is now frequently spotted alone. Prince Harry's solo excursions, whether to London, Las Vegas, or a 2-hour drive to Nobu in Los Angeles, paint a picture of a man seeking escape. He appears lighter, less managed when he is away from the frantic scattergun energy of the Sussex PR machine. Meanwhile, Meghan continues to spiral through identities. 1 month, she is a fashionista at Paris Fashion Week, deploying her entourage to navigate the red carpet, while Anna Wintour politely keeps her distance. The next, she is an actress hinting at an Amazon cameo. Then she is a lifestyle guru launching jam and dog biscuits. She wants to be a celebrity, but the tragedy of Meghan Markle is that she demands the reverence of a royal without the duty, and the commercial success of a Kardashian without the work ethic. As the reality of their isolation sets in, rumors of a desperate countermeasure have begun to leak. A vow renewal ceremony framed not as a private reaffirmation of love, but as a potential reality-style series. A calculated piece of storytelling designed to project a cohesive, happy family to an audience that has already stopped watching. But you cannot produce a reality show about a fairy tale when the prince is actively seeking the exit and the castle is running out of gold. The whisper of a televised vow renewal is not a sign of romantic endurance. It is a glaring distress signal. In the unforgiving ecosystem of Hollywood, truly secure and powerful couples do not need to invite a production crew to validate their private devotion. They do not need to monetize their marital milestones to stay relevant. When the idea of a reality-style reaffirmation of love is leaked to the press, it is rarely about romance. It is about inventory. It is a desperate attempt to manufacture a storyline when the organic narrative has stalled a frantic PR band-aid applied to a psychological hemorrhage. For the Sussexes, whose entire brand architecture was built on the premise of a grand US against the world love story, the prospect of producing their own affection for the camera suggests that the organic capital has finally run dry. To understand the depth of this crisis, one must look at the devastating isolation that now surrounds Prince Harry. When he lived within the rigid walls of the British monarchy, he was undoubtedly restricted, but he was also fundamentally protected. He had a built-in infrastructure of loyalty, lifelong friends bound by aristocratic discretion, and an institution that absorbed his mistakes. In California, that safety net does not exist. Hollywood is a transactional town. Your value is strictly tied to your cultural relevance and your latest streaming numbers, as the elite power players slowly step back. Harry finds himself marooned in a gilded fortress with a rotating cast of public relations managers and lifestyle executives. The polo matches and occasional charity dinners offer a facade of community, but the underlying reality is a profound structural loneliness. He traded an institution that protected him for an industry that consumes him. This isolation is compounded by the deafening silence from London. The most brutal retaliation from the palace has been its absolute refusal to engage. In the early days of their exit, the Sussexes wielded the threat of explosive revelations like a weapon, keeping the royal family in a state of high anxiety. But the palace eventually adapted, deploying a strategy of supreme indifference. They offered no counterattacks, no public defenses, and no apologies. They simply moved on. This weaponized silence starved the Sussexes of the conflict they needed to sustain their victimhood narrative. Without the friction of a royal feud, Harry and Meghan were forced to stand on their own commercial merits. And that is exactly where the foundation began to crack. There is no one left to blame for the stalled projects, the failed product launches, or the empty calendar. The enemy is no longer the British press or the royal courtiers. The crisis is entirely in-house. The tension over how to navigate this reality has seemingly caused a permanent internal rift in their strategy. We are witnessing the soft, unannounced separation of their public identities. Harry is increasingly leaning back into the only arena where he still commands genuine respect, his work with veterans in the Invictus Games. When he is seen at these events, often alone, his demeanor shifts. The tight-guarded expression vanishes. He appears authentic, grounded, and reminiscent of the prince the public once adored. He is seeking the safety of his military roots, a world where duty means something, and where he is not required to sell jam to influencers. Conversely, Meghan's trajectory is pointing in the exact opposite direction. Her strategic pivots from royal duchess to podcast host to potential Hollywood producer, and now to a lifestyle brand purveyor, reveal a staggering lack of core identity. She is attempting to play the billionaire philanthropist game without the billionaire bank account. Every public appearance is meticulously curated, every outfit quietly screaming its price tag, yet the impact is consistently hollow. When she attends high-profile networking events, the visual evidence is telling. The untouched glasses of champagne, the forced smiles, the unbothered bystanders who do not treat her like royalty, but like just another celebrity hustling for a deal. These are not minor details. They are devastating psychological clues. They expose the widening gulf between the status she believes she inherently deserves and the commercial reality she's actually facing. This brings us to the most agonizing contradiction of all and the true source of the marital warfare. Prince Harry has spent the last few years publicly chronicling his therapeutic journey, framing himself as a man doing the hard work to heal his generational trauma, yet the very woman who encouraged him to break free from his family is now recreating the exact conditions that traumatized him in the first place. By subtly pushing their children into the digital spotlight to salvage a flailing commercial enterprise, the boundary between private sanctity and public consumption is being erased. For a man who views the media as the ultimate destructive force, watching his children become algorithm bait on a social media grid must be an agonizing betrayal of his core values. He is trapped in a paradox. To support his wife's ambition, he must compromise his deepest instinct to protect his children. This is why this story resonates far beyond the confines of royal gossip. It is not simply a tale of a disgruntled prince and a frustrated actress. It is a modern tragedy about the illusion of power and the toxic nature of commercialized grievance. It forces the audience to examine what happens when you strip away the titles, the wealth, and the institutional protection, leaving only two people trying to outrun their own irrelevance. They convince the world and perhaps themselves that their love could conquer a 1,000-year-old monarchy. But what they are discovering is that love alone cannot sustain a media empire, and victimhood is a depreciating asset. As we look to the future, there will likely be no grand explosive announcement. The collapse of Brand Sussex will not happen overnight. Instead, we will likely see a continued painful attrition. More solo trips, more separate charitable endeavours, more frantic brand reboots that quietly fade into the background. They are fundamentally trapped by their own narrative. To separate officially would be to admit catastrophic defeat, proving their harshest critics right and destroying the final remnants of their brand equity. But to stay together on this current trajectory requires a level of moral compromise that seems increasingly unsustainable. They are bound together not just by their history, but by a shared, silent desperation, performing a play to a theatre that is slowly emptying out. If you want to continue unpacking the deeper psychological currents behind the world's most carefully managed public images, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We do not just read the headlines here, we read the subtle signals they try to hide.